Is the US a full-on kleptocracy now? NYU professor Scott Galloway seems to think so. Welcome back to the Spin Cycle, guys, and I got a video here for you. NBC, NYU professor Scott Galloway was on Morning Joe, and he had some interesting things about the current state of the US economy, political class, billionaire class. Let's listen.
Of the Raging Moderates podcast. Scott, so glad you're here to walk us through this this morning. Remember, it was just 4 years ago, about right now, that Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, Meta, pulled Donald Trump's accounts down after the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. And now you fast forward 4 years, Donald Trump threatening Mark Zuckerberg during the campaign. And it does look, just the last few days, last couple of weeks, like full capitulation, giving Donald Trump exactly what he wants. What do you see in this move?
First off, good to be with you, Willie. I see that all CEOs in tech should stop using the term stakeholders and just go back to really the truth here and talk about shareholders. 4 years ago, the term was called moderation. Now it's being called censorship. And with this decision, the CEO of Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, gets kind of a twofer. He gets to placate, at least temporarily, the president who threatened to put him in jail for the rest of his life. And he gets to save maybe upwards of $5 billion, which is how much they spend on their safety and security department. And at a price earnings ratio of 30, that's potentially a $150 billion increase in market capitalization. Mark Zuckerberg owns 15% of the company. So you have what is effectively a get out of jail card potentially from someone who appears to be an oligarch threatening to put people in jail, and add 15 to $20 billion to his net worth. The greatest trade of 2024. It wasn't Bitcoin. It wasn't NVIDIA. It was Elon Musk investing $250 million directly in the Trump campaign.
So you see what Scott Galloway is saying there, and he's admitting the truth that Elon Musk and a handful of other billionaires bought the election for Donald Trump. So we are living in kleptocracy. And currently, Mark Zuckerberg, owner of Meta, Facebook, multi-billionaire, is in trouble with the government, and he's got a big case coming up. So he also is trying to buy favor with President-elect Donald Trump. He donated $1 million to the inauguration, just like a bunch of other billionaires did. And basically right now, our country is being bought by billionaires, and by electing Donald Trump and Elon Musk, we let it happen. Let's listen to some more.
Trump won since the election. Elon Musk's worth has gone up $140 billion. So that's effectively, I believe, about a 56,000% return on investment. So we've gone full kleptocracy. We can never, in my opinion, wave our finger at Russia again. When the president, the elected president, is taking public trust and public authority and weaponizing governments and doling out capital and market share and contracts and threatening to use regulatory action against the competitors who don't give money to his inaugural committee or don't kind of bend the knee, we are effectively in a kleptocracy. Russia is the role model. We are becoming more like Russia every day. That's where we are.
I agree with Scott. We are becoming more like Russia every day. And if we're not careful and we don't start voting with our minds instead of our hearts and our racism, we are going to end up living under a dictatorship. And I know some of the MAGA people want that, but be careful what you wish for.
Adjustments that Zuckerberg was announcing. Some of them I think were significant. Some I think were a bit overblown. For instance, they already have offices in Texas, but he made a big stink about moving the content moderation office to Texas. And then I saw Lena Khan on CNBC, who suggested that, there is an FTC suit that is going to be considered in the next couple months that looks at whether Meta is a monopoly on the social media network. And she said this is plainly Mark Zuckerberg trying to get a sweetheart deal from the FTC. Do you see it that way?
I think that's part of it. Also, the move to Texas not only pleases the conservative side of the aisle, which he's trying to do and has made several actions to try and come across as more conservative, it's the ultimate quiet firing. Because if you tell, rather than a series of bad safety and security team from California to Texas, you're naturally going to lose probably 30 to 50% of the employees. So this is again nothing about placating the Republican Party and saving money and adding shareholder value. And what is so shocking, I mean, just from a personal standpoint, what's the point of having all this money if you aren't at some point going to show some fidelity as a 40 or a 50-something-year-old man that has the wealth of the GDP of a Latin American nation to actually standing up and showing some fidelity to American values? Bezos has got the yacht. Tim Cook, Jensen Huang at NVIDIA is worth more than Intel or Boeing. At what point? When do the men show up here? When do the Americans show up here? So
this is a great point that Scott Galloway makes here. I mean, why are all these guys kowtowing to Donald Trump and Elon Musk just for more money? They have so much money already. Can't they just be men and stand up? I mean, look at Mark Zuckerberg. What a little bitch. Come on. Elon Musk is a weirdo. Zuckerberg's a little bitch. Bezos, who knows about that guy? He's like jacked up on steroids now. These guys, they get this kind of wealth and they just go out of their minds, and all they want is more power, more wealth, more tax cuts. It's time to eat the rich is what it's time for.
this is not only incredibly shocking but not disappointing from Trump, but where's the leadership? Where are the men that have such blessings and such prosperity from the rule of law and capitalism and competition? And we don't need more mergers and acquisitions. We need more breakups. One company owns 2/3 of all social media globally. Meta. One company has 93% of all share of all search. Google. And if you don't think every day we don't pay higher prices, one company has 50% of all e-commerce. Amazon. The percentage of revenues that have gone to Amazon from third-party retailers has gone up from 24 to 50%. Look at the rents that parents are paying on Facebook when 24% of teen girls are now addicted to Facebook. 6% of our teenagers are clinically addicted to drugs and alcohol. 24% are addicted to Instagram. And the number of teen girls self-harming has doubled. So if you want higher rents as a consumer, as a retailer, and as a parent, that's where we're headed.
You know, Scott, there's so much to discuss here. You've talked though for some time about how this entire system is rigged, and it is rigged against working Americans. And rigged for billionaires. And you've said also people like yourself who made a lot of money in the markets, been very successful, but the tax system is and again, this was, you've been saying this for years now. Talk about how this is accelerating. You talked about the Elon Musk example. Talk about how this is accelerating and how this, and I say this as a small government conservative, this is a threat to American capitalism. This is, we can look at a lot of different threats facing this country, but moving towards this sort of oligarchy with all of these monopolies. And I've always told the story, during COVID. Somebody called me up and said, "Hey, you need to invest in the stock market." I go, I don't really do that. I don't trust the stock market. I don't want. He goes, "Just invest in the monopolies." I go, "The monopolies?" He goes, "Yeah, Meta. Invest in Meta and Amazon and Microsoft."
Of course, Scarborough is worried about American capitalism because, he gets his $10 million a year to be on TV every morning, and he doesn't invest in stocks because he doesn't really need any more money. I mean, I got to give it to him. He's happy with the money he has. He's filthy rich. He's been making that money for 20 or 30 years on MSNBC. He was a former Republican representative, the old party Republicans, although him and Mika just recently capitulated to Trump because they see the writing on the wall and they don't want to lose out, so they want to keep their money flowing in, that, they're $10 million each a year. So I don't really put much weight in what he says, and, he's worried about capitalism. I would much rather see us go to more of a social democracy where the means of production are controlled by the people, the powers in the people, the hands, very unionized, that kind of system, not a full-on capitalist, bloated, warthog Donald Trump system that we're living in right now, a kleptocracy, basically, like Scott Galloway is saying. Let's keep watching.
And he named 5 or 6. And they are. They're, like you just said, they're monopolies. Lena Khan tried to break it up, and you seriously would have thought that Karl Marx was marching down, Wall Street.
Lena Khan, by the way, is the head of the Consumer Protection Finance Bureau, CFPB, Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, which is a great organization. And you see these clowns on Rogan, I can't remember his name, the guy who started Netscape, talking about the CFPB like it's stealing bank accounts from people and stuff. What it's doing is keeping you from getting your bank account raided by these billionaires and these crooked corporations. So if you ever get a chance to vote in favor of the CFPB, do it. It's for your own good. The billionaires hate it. The corporations hate it because it keeps them in check. They're the ones who take big banks like Wells Fargo when they're ripping off customers with crazy fees and stuff. They're the government organization that will take them to task and fine them and put them in jail if they're ripping off the consumers like they do so often.
And you combine that combination that you're talking about with the fact that billionaires are getting richer and richer by the second while screaming socialism. And what does that say about where American capitalism is going over the next 5-10 years?
I think it comes down to a basic question. What is America? And my kind of economic role model is Peter Drucker. I think an economy in America exists to create a robust middle class. The most ascendant countries over the last 20 years have been China and India. And it's one basic litmus test. How many people are you bringing into the middle class? The greatest innovation in history is not the iPhone or the semiconductor. It's the American middle class that beat back fascism in the middle of World War II, has financed and built the greatest innovations, whether it's radar, whether it's the internet, whether it's vaccines. The middle class in America is the greatest innovation in history. And people like to fall back into this right-wing notion that it's naturally self-healing. It's not. It's an accident in history. Typically throughout history, you have a small number of people who weaponize government. They're very talented. They aggregate power. They weaponize government, and they aggregate more and more spoils. And then the good news is it's self-correcting. This level of income inequality is usually self-correcting. The bad news is the means of self-correction are typically war, famine, or revolution.
That's a great point. This is the pitchforks are coming, the guillotines are coming. When the billionaire class and inequality gets too large and the gap gets too big, it is going to self-correct, and the people of the United States or Russia or whatever are going to take it back, because the people are the masses. The people have the real power. The billionaires only have temporary power. And if the billionaires push it too hard, which I think they're starting to realize now with the healthcare CEO being assassinated, they're starting to pull back on their propaganda a little bit now. But if they push too hard, they're going to be the ones in the guillotine, and that's what Scott Galloway is saying right here.
And if you want to talk about tax policy, the myth in tax policy is that the rich don't pay their taxes. That's just not true. The fulcrum is the following. There's super earners and super owners. The folks around your table are probably considered super earners. You make exceptional livings, but it's all current income reported on a W-2. And if you live in New Jersey or New York, you're probably paying 48 to 52% tax rates.
Right.
But if you're a super owner, I make my living starting and selling businesses. My last business, which was sold for $160 million, I'm very transparent about money. This gestalt or zeitgeist that people should not talk about money is nothing but an attempt to keep poor people down, because rich people talk about money all the time. It's important to be financially literate. The first $10 million for my $160 million sale was tax-free. My effective tax rate over the last 10 years has been 17%. The average tax rate on the wealthiest 25 Americans is 6%. Corporate tax rates are at their lowest point since 1939. At the same time, taxes have gone up for the super owners. Now, the bottom 50% don't pay much federal income tax, but they pay a lot in usage and consumption taxes. But this misdirect talking about tax rates misses the point. It's the tax code, which has gone from 400 pages to 4,000. And that 3,600 pages, quite frankly, is there to screw the middle class and continue to transfer more money to the super wealthy.
What a great point. That 3,600 pages he's talking about in the tax code, that's the loopholes that all the billionaires and corporations pay expensive accountants and lawyers to use those loopholes to get out of paying even more tax. The loopholes that just aren't available to you and me, working class people who work for a paycheck.
The fastest growing demographic group in America is not seniors. It's not Latins. It's billionaires. We had 500 billionaires 10 years ago. We now have 2,500. So if you want to cram more and more wealth into a smaller group of people, we're on our way. And the weird thing about America is that we support it because our superpower is our optimism. The Achilles heel is that 99%, the bottom 99% who are getting screwed, don't mind these policies because they believe at some point they're going to be in that 1%. But where are we? We're in a country that's had unprecedented prosperity, but similar to the way William Gibson described the future, it has not been evenly distributed. When 40% of U.S. households are struggling with some sort of medical or dental debt, when a quarter or 20% of households with kids are food insecure, and yet we have one man, Jensen Huang, and I like Jensen, who is now worth more than Boeing. I mean, something is wrong here. And just let me go to the psychology of happiness. I think a lot about happiness because I struggle with it, Joe. You effectively, once you get above a certain level of wealth, you get no incremental happiness. So why on earth would you not go back to a tax policy of the 60s, 70s, and 80s where, say, above, pick a big number, 10 million, you actually pay more than 10%, maybe more than 20%, maybe more than 50%, because the difference between $30,000 a year for a household and $50,000 is enormous to the well-being of that household. Low-income kids in low-income households have higher resting blood pressure, but the difference between making 10 million a year and 15 million a year offers you no happiness.